Welcome to the Franchise Frontier, the podcast where we explore the evolving franchise landscape, dive into latest industry trends, and share actionable tools and tactics to help you build and grow your business.
2, 3, 4.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Franchise Frontier podcast. Here we explore the world of business ownership, trying to unlock the keys to success while overcoming pitfalls to avoid. Today, we're excited to welcome Alex Siegler, owner of Stand Strong Fencing of East Austin. So excited to have you. I'm excited for you to be a part of it. Excited to hear your insights. So let's get started. I appreciate you being on the show. Talk to us quickly, if you don't mind, of just how did you, what inspired you to become a business owner? Where did it drum up in you? Is it something that's always been there? But what made you decide business ownership was for you?
Yeah, thank you, Dave. I really appreciate being on today and appreciate the invitation. What has driven me to become a business owner? I think a lot of it comes down to, pedigree. I have two grandfathers who both passed a long time ago, but on each side they were entrepreneurs, and just being able to kind of admire that from a historical standpoint and understand that, they went into business after World War II when it was like, they weren't sure exactly what the world was going to look like, and they wanted to shape it. And so, skip a generation, my parents were not business owners, but I always had that entrepreneurial itch. And I sold popcorn as a Boy Scout growing up. I've done plenty of door-to-door sales. I graduated from college and I went into tech sales. And that's always an entrepreneurial effort, right? Because there's high risk and high reward, and you might get paid mostly commission and a low base salary, and you got to make it work. And you do that by your own hard work. And so I think that led me into really in earnest wanting to start something. And I was in the tech world selling software and in some leadership positions in startup companies. And I began to get a little disillusioned after, each one of these companies kind of failed, honestly. And while I was doing well at each of these companies, I still was caught up in layoffs. And when you dedicate your employment and a big part of your life to these companies that you don't feel the reciprocation back, it can wear on you. And so for me, that was a big catalyst for really just wanting to strike off on my own and do something interesting and worthwhile. And in the real world, I had been selling software that at various times may or may not have done what the marketing team said it actually did, right? So I wanted to be able to put something literally in the ground, right? And exploring construction opportunities was interesting, but really what I did was first look at biz buy sell for businesses to buy, small local ones that were for sale by the owners. But that process for me just wasn't rigid enough. And so, there's no real prescription for doing that. And so that's really when I decided to dive headfirst into exploring franchises. And I used a franchise consultant. Shout out to Bruce Brady. He's awesome. He really got to know me. He knew my market here in Austin, and he presented me with some opportunities. And, Stand Strong Fencing was one of the 6 or 7 he presented to me, and one of the ones I really explored in earnest. And there were just a lot of things that lined up really well between myself, my criteria, my situation, and Stand Strong and horsepower.
Appreciate you diving in there. It's interesting, like you said, there are a ton of businesses in the franchise market. It's nice to narrow that down. It's kind of interesting. You said you wanted a business where you could literally put something into the ground, and you chose Stand Strong Fencing. So when you look at from the start of the process to just open doors, not even what you're doing now, but just open doors, can you just talk a little bit about, if I was a franchise owner or somebody who was looking to purchase a franchise, what advice would you give them? How do you prepare yourself for this process, and how do you prepare yourself for business ownership?
So I would absolutely say that the folks who know what they're talking about, be it your franchise consultant, the folks who are helping to fund your business, the people at the franchisor, when they talk about a timeline, their timeline is pretty accurate. And if you're trying to rush it, you're going to be setting yourself up for disappointment. And I realized that, going into this exploration and then buying a territory and starting from there, like that was a huge process, and it takes time. And you might think from the outset, like, no, I move fast. I can do, that way faster. And, I'm going to be able to get it done quickly. It's always going to take longer than you think, and it's going to be harder than you think. There are so many complications that can arise when you are starting a business. For me, I went down the route that a lot of people are probably familiar with or researching, and that was rolling over my IRA pre-tax dollars into a rollover on business startups or ROBs. And then, that was a partial funding of my business. And then the rest, I went through a bank for an SBA loan. And I didn't get the first SBA loan from the first bank that I went with, but it ended up working out way better because I had to find a different bank, different loan value, but the terms were way better. So that's something I could have never anticipated, was how fraught with challenges it can be to go down that route. But it's always possible. If you're determined to be a business owner like me, you're going to be determined to get through those challenges, which I did. And outside of the funding, there's, of course, with horsepower, there's the decision day, or whatever it's called now, where we went to Omaha, and that was great to meet
Discovery Day.
Discovery Day, to meet a lot of other potential owners. And I met a lot of folks who did end up purchasing territories all over the country. And I really found a lot of respect for those folks and the people who I met at Horsepower. And then, fast forward, I chose to buy a couple territories, and then went through the onboarding process, which is, again, a very prescriptive process and really well laid out. I think having Dean and a few of the other folks on the Stand Strong team really hold our hands through that process and try to keep us accountable. And that was helpful for me because I'm good at following the prescription, and maybe I'll do it my own way a little bit here and there, like any, defiant entrepreneur might do. But I like having that blueprint, and Horsepower and Stand Strong really did a good job of providing that blueprint, and the coaches and the resources, and, like I said, a prescription every step of the way. So, I mean, that process, I probably should have been open and running in November. So it would have been August. I bought my territory and established my C Corp. And then November would have been my target date to open my doors. But because of the challenge with the first SBA loan, that pushed it. We didn't have an opening date in December, because December is just way too hectic. And January 20th was our official opening date. And yeah, I think that process was pretty simple to follow. Not every step is simple. There's a lot of, ways that things can get complicated throughout the onboarding and training process as well. But, it culminated in going to Nashville for the Academy week. And, that was reconnecting with some of those potential owners who are now owners, and we're all in the same spot. And that was really great just to be in that area and learn from Eli himself and see, a few jobs that his team was actually doing live. So overall, it was, a very roller coaster ride-ish type process for me. I had a lot of ups and downs, and that's what you kind of have to go into it expecting, is it's not gonna be easy. Even if you have all the cards, facing up and what's going on, you're gonna encounter challenges. And I'm, of course, finding the same thing with doing fence jobs now.
Yeah, I would imagine, as I've been in the franchise space and looked at it, when you talk about that timeline, there's a lot of people that get into franchising that I'll be ready to do this in X amount of time, or I want to do this in Y amount of time. But a lot of the pitfalls or speed bumps are really no one's fault. It could be the bank, it could be this, it could be that. It's not a fault of the franchisor. It's not a fault of the franchisee. It's just the way things go. It's not a fault of the funding partner. It's just the way things go. You make a great point. It's extremely valuable to understand that everybody involved is working toward having your business open as soon as possible, as prepared as possible, and as successful as possible. And no one is trying to put a slowdown on that, but sometimes it just is, it's going to go the way it goes. It's not always a bad thing. There's a good portion of it that I'm sure now you're like, man, I'm really glad that it, to your point, I thought I was all on board. I had this for the funding, and then I end up getting a different bank with a better rate. It's like, just, that's kind of the way things go a little bit. And I think that there's a there's a reason for the process. And then when you talk about the onboarding and you talk about the playbooks, there's plenty of things in that playbook. There's part of those things that, Alex, you know those already, and those are easy for you. Start a bank account, whatever it might be. Those are really easy, but it's important to have every one of those pages in there to follow, so you just don't overlook something that could then slow your business down moving forward. So it's good to check all those boxes. When you talk about, since you've been open, biggest surprise, biggest challenge that pops up in your head?
Where to start? I mean, it's so exciting, and I'm grateful for where I am right now, and the ability to go out and, talk with homeowners and talk with business owners and build standard fences and talk about custom fences and get jobs done. I think a big thing that I may have been ignorant to is just the construction world in general is like, there's always going to be a challenge on almost every job. I don't think I've had a job yet from big to small that didn't have some kind of challenge that changed the trajectory of that job a little bit, and some more than others. I guess the minutia is like, I didn't realize I'd be at Home Depot 2 to 3 times a day when we've got jobs or more, right? And that's funny, and in its own way, it's kind of annoying in another way, but I like it, and I've become that guy. It's like, all right, there's a Home Depot there, there's one over there. Like, I know where it is. I'm gonna go swing in and park in the pro contractor and hope I don't hit any other cars with my truck in the parking lot. But that's the biggest thing is like, I've learned through doing this entrepreneurial effort that your job as an entrepreneur is to basically solve problems all the time, right? Life is made of challenges, and there's no better reminder than when you're in the thick of it. And then once you've solved that challenge and you look back at it, there's nothing that I would like look at and say, wow, I want that challenge again. But there's definitely those challenges that I'm grateful that I encountered early on. A lot of it has to do with like not buying enough material, or sometimes the bane of my existence is the fact that I bought too much concrete. And in a lot of those situations, as my business is structured now, I'm the one who is loading that concrete back on my truck, taking it back to my little garage and unloading it. It's like, I didn't realize that I was gonna have to cancel my gym membership because I'd already be so jacked from lifting all the concrete.
That's not always a bad thing. I think it's interesting too to think about when you go back to the beginning of the process that we were talking about previously about, how things just go in the order. It's sort of sets you up for the construction world a little bit in the home service, because you being able to do the fence sometimes depends on somebody else, or somebody spraying for wires or whatever that might be. There's little things that are out of your control that you can do that. I also think it's interesting, as I talk to many franchisees around the space, we fast forward and do this podcast again in 1 year, your trips to Home Depot will be far less. The extra concrete will be far less, right? And I think that no matter how good of a playbook, no matter how good of a course to run your business, some of these things, you just have to not make those mistakes, or you just have to go through it a little bit to say, well, my guys work like this, and this is what they like better than, so-and-so in Philadelphia, whatever that might be. You can't always say, oh, this is the only way to do it, because your crew might come in there and do things differently, and it's just a different process. And it's just figuring out your process in your business is basically what the entrepreneurial mindset that you think about. It's like, where sometimes it will lead to frustration, but I can see that, it's always putting it in the file for you, so you can always continue to figure out, how to do things better and how to do things best for your business.
Yeah. And I think you kind of have to go into it with this like blind confidence as well. And that can be difficult for some folks and second nature to others. But it means that you're just going to go get it done. And if problems pop up, then you're going to solve them. And for a while I felt, and sometimes I still feel like this, people talk about imposter syndrome, right? I didn't grow up in the construction industry, didn't have friends, family, parents in it. So at times I've joked with friends, and I'm fine with this, but like, I feel like I'm cosplaying as a construction contractor, right? But it's fine, because now we've done 50 jobs. And even though there are a lot of things I know that I don't know, and more that I don't know that I don't know. That lessons over time. So I think going into it with a mentality of like, I'm going to tackle this, we're going to get it done, sets you up for those issues. Just framing yourself and knowing that like we're going to encounter problems. Just like I was saying in the onboarding phase, you're gonna have roadblocks. It's about how you get past them.
100%. And I think you just have to be an entrepreneur, to be a business owner. You have to have a high level of FIO. You have to have a high level of figure it out. And that doesn't mean that you weren't prepared for it, but what you're figuring out is how you can do it, right? It doesn't mean you weren't prepared for this, and it doesn't make sense that, so and so uses this guide for the fence. It's how you are going to do it and how it makes sense for you and how you can process it well. That's what you figure out. You're not figuring out where to buy the fence material. You know where to buy the fence material, but it's like, how does it make sense to you? So when you're running your business, it can be successful. So when you talk about your day-to-day operations, not as an imposter, right? Talk us through quickly just a typical day in the life of a business owner for Stand Strong Fencing.
Yeah. So right now my team is very small. I've got someone who I hired as a sales guy, and he's evolved a little bit more into helping out with estimates, but also doing some project management when I need someone to step in. He's kind of an all-around miscellaneous, person for me. He can pinch hit when we need someone to go in and do a small job. He comes from the fencing world. So, I've got that support, but still it's primarily on me. I'm sleeping, and drinking this business, right? And I wake up, for example, most days before 6 a.m., around 6 a.m., especially if we've got a job, and I'll go meet the crew to start that job, get it kicked off, make sure we have everything. And a lot of times we might think we have everything at the beginning and we don't. So if we've got jobs going on, then there's a likelihood that I'm going to get a call from the crew when I'm out then going and doing estimates, or I'm doing networking activities, right? I'm in a networking group called BNI, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with, and it's led to a lot of business, but I'm committed to going to that every single Wednesday. So, that's one of those things is like, I could tell you maybe what my typical week looks like. It's a little harder to tell you what the typical day looks like, because some days we might have 4 estimates and a job, and I'm bouncing between those. Some days like today, for example, we had to put the finishing touches on one commercial job. It's done. It's complete. I'm outside of a job we just finished, and it's before noon, right? We started it this morning. It was just 50 feet of fence. The crew knocked it out. It's awesome. That feels great. I've got 2 other jobs going on right now. And I say it kind of because I'm like, holy crap, how do I have that many jobs going on right now? And it's a little braggy, but I'm excited about it. But it does get stressful when you're doing that and you're such a small team. So the rest of the team, all my laborers and crew leaders, it's subcontractors. So there's 3 crews doing work right now. And to be able to think about, okay, how am I coordinating all these people? You just break it down into chunks, right? Each one has a crew leader. Each one, you have to communicate with a little bit differently. But, I think a lot of it is about staying organized. And I try to keep a to-do list every day. I sometimes fail at keeping it daily. And the to-do list for me, I know I'm not going to knock out everything on that to-do list. And I stress myself out to no end if I expected that every single thing on my to-do list was actually going to get done. Keeping organized, keeping a schedule, making sure that you're documenting everything. I think it can be hard to, as you're buying a lot of materials, to go back into our system and like enter those expenses. There's a lot of things like that, little things that I am ready to have someone new come in and take over, whether it's like a virtual assistant or, somebody I hire part-time or whatever it happens to be, an operations coordinator, like, fielding inbound leads, which now we're starting to get more inbound leads that we're 5-6 months into this, and we're getting leads from different sources. And when I'm out on an estimate or I'm like running around for a job, like, yeah, I love getting those leads in, but then to like switch your contacts and have to be like, okay, now I have to focus on this one person who's got one problem with their fence of some nature. And I have to figure out right now, how do I schedule? When do I when am I able to like find a time on my calendar where I'm not going to have to go meet my distributor at the work site when they're delivering, or meet my crew, or something that's going to pop up. So that's always constantly on my mind. So if it sounds a little chaotic for me right now, it is. I'm super early, and we're a super small team again. So those are the things that I'm trying to reduce that chaos right now. And I'm in that phase of like really analyzing where are those choke points and where is the most effective way to solve them.
Yeah, I think your point is well taken in terms of you're just at the point now where you're starting to structure your day or your week so you can have time to work in the business work on the business as opposed to in the business. In the beginning, obviously you're just in the business and it's chaos, but as things start to go, I think that comes to your point of like probably what leads to you having that mindset from your grandfather and that type of stuff is being able to, even though it's a small step, just leaning back a little bit and going, okay, moving forward, this is going to be a bottleneck of sorts. And I have to find a way to manipulate the situation and what's best for the business. But I don't necessarily have to do it right this second. I can just tell by talking to you, I'll take it on myself right now and be stressed and chaos, knowing when I have time to address said thing, I will get it addressed and it'll be a better situation for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you talk about, I know we talked a little bit in the beginning about if someone was talking about buying a business, what would they, and I think that it's incredible that, to your point of how you're just always learning something new and feeling like you're a part of it. Um, what would you tell somebody who's thinking about taking the leap of business ownership? What would you say? You should know this or ask these questions before you take this leap.
I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that say like they treat it like some people treat having a kid. It's like everybody's scared until like you do it, and then you do it and you're scared as heck. I don't know firsthand. I've got plenty of friends that I witnessed that secondhand, but I think it's business ownership may not be for everyone. It's kind of for the people who are a little insane and a little overconfident. I think that what's prepared me personally has been a career in sales and a career of rejection. I mean, most of being in sales, unless you're like, the best thing to ever happen to sales is rejection, right? Unless you have a Dean Ritchie, who's our, sales coach and horsepower, unless you have a close rate like he had and his businesses, which was incredibly high, you're getting rejected a lot. And to be able to take that rejection and frame it, much like we were talking about, as a learning opportunity rather than getting bogged down. I mean, it's hard and some, it can be emotional too when you've put so much time and effort into, an estimate and somebody looks at it once and says, nah, we're going with the other guy. And then you never hear from them. Right. That kind of thing can hurt, but it happens so often that you have to brush it off. And I think to be a business owner, much like in a lot of things, and especially in sales, you have to recognize that it's a high risk, it's a high potential reward, but just have to trudge through and make it happen. It's for someone who's an action taker rather than an overanalyzer. If you're sitting and analyzing like, shoot, I have a job and now I need to go get vendor quotes from 17 different vendors to get the perfect price. And I might buy, pickets here and concrete here and do like you're overcomplicating it. Right. So I think it's about keeping it simple, knowing that there will be challenges that come up, knowing that you're going to have to solve problems through almost every step of the way, and then not letting your highs become too high, like a big win, getting that job that's, that 40K job that you've been really working on and trying to get the customer to sign on and really trust you. That's a big win, but you can't go out and celebrate for 2 weeks because you got that job. You got to go on to the next one, and then not letting your lows be too low. And it goes to the rejection or when you have to make things right because of some mistakes, whatever that you made on a job, and it's going to cost you, and it might cost you more than that job was actually worth. You have to recognize, as I'm actually doing, I'm in that situation with a job. You have to recognize that that's your learning experience, right? You will never do that again. So going into it with that kind of overarching mentality of high risk, be ready for the problems, Be ready to temper your thoughts when you get excited about how great that win was, and similarly when you get downtrodden about how difficult that loss was.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. You bring up two really, really great points too. And I think this probably comes from your sales background. Everybody wants to go out and bid as many jobs as they can because they want to win as many jobs as they can. But I do agree with you that one of the biggest things that we miss in sales is taking time to debrief from a no or even from a yes and make sure that is there some question that I could have answered better? Whatever that, that goes back to I was a football coach for years, and you watch film, right? You go in, and that kind of goes back to, obviously now with horsepower using real AI and those type of things, being able to go in and just, I stumbled over this. I wish I would have said this better. Or is this something I need to be more educated on? Just debriefing yourself to educate yourself for the next conversation, as opposed to just running through conversations and continuing to make mistakes, which everybody makes a mistake every time they talk about sales. But it's just like, how do I deflect? How do I answer these questions? How do I make people feel more comfortable? I think you're spot on in terms of that, and knowing how to make that right for people and how to learn every single time when you do that.
Yeah. And if you
Well, I know you talked. Go ahead.
I was going to say, if you build enough trust along the way with that prospective customer, and even if they choose not to go with you, then you may have built enough trust to actually ask them those types of questions to get the feedback like, hey, what could I have done better here? And if you ask it in a way that's doesn't make them feel like you're combative or challenging them, hey, genuinely, we're always improving as a business. It's unfortunate we didn't get to work with you this time. Just out of curiosity, what could we have done better in this situation so that we can do it better in the future with other homeowners like yourself, right? If you've built that trust up, and people can respond, and they will tell you the things that you may not have expected.
I think that's incredible advice. And I would imagine most people in sales do not take the time to do that. But I think it's incredible advice. I think if you're at the end of the day, if you're trying to just build rapport with the client and do the best you can, and you felt like you gave your best presentation you could and you didn't win the job, you have an opportunity, to your point there, to just ask them very kindly and politely, hey, could you tell me if there's anything I could have done better moving forward? You never know, right? You never know what could happen. That the contractor they decided to go with could be full the next day, and they says, you know what, let me call it back, or they could refer you to another person, whatever that might be. I think there's opportunities all the time to better yourself and better the process as a whole. So I think that's an incredible insight.
Definitely.
So Alex, for you, when you think about the long-term vision of your business, what's next? We touched on it briefly, virtual assistant, maybe someone to hire. Do you see yourself as you grow? Is the answer down the road to scale for more territories, focus on perfecting your current operations? Where do you see yourself, or your long-term vision?
Yeah. So what I usually tell people is that I've gotten into business in general and into this business to give myself options and the freedom to kind of choose where I want to be at a given moment. And the options I'm trying to build for myself are, can I build this in the next 3 to 5 years, a business that is saleable? Is there someone who might see this business and say, wow, they're doing a great job, let's make an offer? And if that offer's right, I'm open to selling. I'm not looking at this business as like my baby forever that, is always going to be just mine. I see it as something that can grow. In the next 2 years, I'd like to be on track to be doing $2 million a year in sales. I think we can get there with the current territory that we've got. But building in an option and building enough cash flow and enough cash reserves to buy another territory. I could absolutely see us doing well enough in the future to buy an existing neighboring territory, right? Or buy the business from a neighbor, if that is a thing that's available. And, having multiple salespeople, multiple project managers, multiple crews, several jobs a day, like I can see that. And part of the reason I can see that is because, especially in Austin, there are some very large independent fence contractors out there. And, there's a few that do $30 million a year. And there's no reason why my business couldn't do $30 million a year. So, that would be very ambitious. That company that I mentioned has been around a long time. But even so, I think that it's possible to get there. And just going after that trajectory, I think provides potential stops along the way for those options that I mentioned.
Yeah, that's great. When you think about one of the things that I know a lot of people in the subcontractor model worry about is finding crews. You had mentioned earlier that right now, I think you said 2 or 3 crews are working currently. Is that something in the process of onboarding that was a concern for you in the beginning? And how have you found that it either is as concerning as you thought, or have you manipulated it to make it work for you in the long run as you run your businesses?
It was definitely a stressor in my mind before I started, but I had to keep telling myself that you can't control it. The prescription is go out your first few weeks, sell jobs, find a contract, a sub or two to talk to about these jobs and get them on their books. And I was really lucky because during onboarding, someone had contacted my phone line. I think they just found us on Google, and it was a crew and they were looking for work. And I had a conversation. It seemed like they had done some great work in the past, and they were willing to, play ball in terms of sign our agreement, in terms of have the requisite levels of insurance. And that was a concern for me because I'd like to do things by the book as much as possible. And so, then we started working together, and they did a few jobs and a few more jobs, and we got on a good roll. Things in Texas are interesting. I think I'm sure are everywhere, but there's a lot of subcontractors looking for work. So I've been contacted many times. And, the subcontractor, funny enough, who did the job that I'm sitting out front of right now, I had lost a job to them. They're a fence company themselves. I lost a job to them from a customer who had showed me their estimate, and I knew, hey, I can't beat that price. It looks like they're doing, what we've proposed. It sounds like a great offer. And then I ended up running into that contractor at our distributor in the yard. And I was like, hey, I lost a job to you. And we just started talking. And the woman who runs the company was willing to do some subcontract work. And it turns out that their price was better than another subcontractor I was working with. So I said, yeah, let me throw you a couple jobs. Let's try it out. And it's become a really great relationship. So that's, the second one that I've had on board. And because I got in kind of a bind with a lot of work, which is good. And I'm this type of person that I want to do the jobs as quickly as we book them, which can get in the way, my own way. Basically, I now have a third sub who's on board. So I don't want to be juggling that many, but they're on the roster, and each one has a different skill set too that I've found. So one is great for wood privacy all day as long as they don't need to weld. One's great for all those and they can do welding. Another one is good for kind of the odd things that come up, like if someone needs a retaining wall, or if someone needs an 8-foot chain link fence and needs it all specced out from a commercial standpoint. I've got these different folks in I'd say on deck, right? And they all have done great work in different ways. So I'm really fortunate to be in a market right now where there are a lot of subs who need work, and a lot of really high quality subs.
It's also an incredible way for you, like you said, to build your roster, right? To build your roster up for when something that really throws you off pops up. There's someone who maybe has a niche for that part of it. You did mention something that I've heard from multiple people, that surprisingly, there's a lot of good conversation and meetings that are being had in the distributor yard, right? When you're there to pick up equipment, there's guys waiting on their truck, and there's just conversation and camaraderie, even though you're in the same business. But I've heard from multiple people that there are a lot of really valuable conversations and things that are happening at the vendor.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I have had fewer of the contractor to contractor conversations than I've had of building relationships with the people at the distributor. I've got my outside sales guy at one of my distributors. I've got him on speed dial. I mean, figuratively, I call him often when I've got a question, and if he's got an answer, it's great. If he's got someone else who can answer it better, he connects me with that person. So having those folks there, but also having them on your side, showing face is really helpful because they get to know you. This, now when I've placed an order on, via email, and then like they're going to be delivering it at some point. When I make that phone call, they see my number, they know who's calling, and they're like, "Hey Alex, your delivery is on schedule for today," or "Hey, it's not going to be on schedule." And then we work out whatever it need, or if I need to get there after 4 p.m. because I need a last minute thing to finish up a job today, that's one of those things that being at the distributor, actually going there, is so, so valuable. And that's something that I think I kind of underestimated at first. And, to Horsepower and to Stand Strong's credit, we are treated very well by our top distributors. I'll say Master Halco, Benford, anytime I contact those guys, they're willing to work with me. They're willing to teach me because I'm someone who is constantly learning. I need that education, but they're willing to, provide us with the Stand Strong fencing discount, whatever that happens to be, or at least like great pricing, because I do continuously shop. And so to have those really great distributors in your back pocket and to be able to go and meet them in person and shake their hand and, enjoy a laugh in the office and, tell them about something that's given you trouble, like maybe they know how to help fix it, or they know another contractor who's been in that situation who's good at that thing, and they'll hook you up with that person.
Yeah, I think that, that leads to the point as the franchisor at Horsepower. I know that, the brand teams are always working on those vendor partnerships to make them better for everybody. So I think that goes a long way. Lastly, I did hear you talk a little bit about a commercial job that you have. I also heard you talk about some BNI groups. Touch a little bit on your tactic or what you wanted to do as far as how you wanted to attack the market, how you wanted to be community centric a little bit, and the BNI group situation, which maybe led to the commercial job that you have or whatnot, but just kind of lead to what your mindset was as far as how do we attack this job and get out in front of people.
Yeah, I think that having been in Austin for 20 years, I've built up a network, and luckily that's helping pay dividends for this business. And just being out there online and out in the community as well has been super fruitful for me. And I think, being in the community, right, you have to be. This is a local business. You're literally like in people's homes, in people's neighborhoods all day, every day. So one of the first things that I did was try to look for events that we could do, whether it was charity or not. But we found the Austin Humane Society Puppy Bowl in February, and we got a booth there. And, we met a lot of great people. It was for, a great cause. And, everybody loves little puppies, and they had a little puppy Super Bowl thing, and that was great. A good opportunity for us to be branding ourselves in the community, and I try to take as many opportunities for that as possible. BNI is a networking group, Business Networking International. You have to be, in each chapter, there's only one member allowed who's in that specific like job type. So there's only one, corporate lawyer, there's only one residential realtor, one mortgage banker, one fence contractor, one roofer, right? So it's designed to like give each other referrals. So I've generated a lot of business out of that, all residential business from that. But my marketing is starting to really catch on. And I think that with my agency, we're able to now feed back Google data like about our customers and jobs that we've won. And Google is now like, the algorithm I think is starting to work better. And I'm starting to get these inbound leads. And an inbound lead that I got was actually for a commercial job at a La Quinta. It's in an area of town that needed some heavier security. Their 4-foot fence wasn't cutting it for keeping people out from going and stealing their ice or their water or doing things in the pool that people shouldn't be doing. So we had this opportunity to go and bid that job, and we just finished that. And the ability to go now and look at that and drive by a major road every day where I drive by and see that fence that we put up, and to hear the relief in the owner's voice about, okay, thank goodness we're not going to have so many people, walking through our parking lot just to like steal our ice or to try to use our bathroom, right? This is going to deter a lot of a lot of that type of activity, and the owner is just so excited now to not have to worry so much. He's carrying pepper spray around daily, and to give him just a little bit of respite from that worry it feels really good.
And that's great. I think it's also a great testament to you to be able to drive by that and have pride in those things, is always ideal and obviously great for your business. You touched on a really good point about finding, whether it be the puppy bowl or whatever that might be, to get out in front. I did an interview before, and somebody made a great point, and they said, people even in your Rolodex, they're not going to know that you just all of a sudden decided to purchase a fencing company. It's important to be out in front. I know that there are times that people don't always love social media, those type of things, but it's important to post, hey, I'm doing this. It's important to tell people that have been your friends for 20 years, just so you know, I'm in this business now. Because you're right. They don't think I wonder if Alex is doing fences now. They're not thinking that. If anything, you're reaching back out to your friends or your contacts or people that you've had relationships with, which is always great for our own person. But secondly, now you've become top of mind. Now, all of a sudden, they're in a separate conversation about, they're in a conversation with Ben, and Ben's talking about, oh, yeah, I got to get a fence around my house. And boom, it pops into I have a really good friend of mine or a good contact who's actually in that space. You should give him a call. I think that it's incredible that you had the wherewithal to say, hey, let's be community centric. Let's get out and do these things, whether we think it's valuable or not valuable at the time, the puppy bowl, right? The conversations that you have and the logo and getting out the brand and brand awareness, I think is key to getting to a point where now you're right. The Google algorithm starts to drive business. And now people are seeing that commercial or that Facebook ad or whatever that might be. And it's not so foreign anymore. Now they're like, I've seen that before somewhere. And that's going to start to generate for you in terms of regular business.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Yeah. Well, Alex, I really appreciate you being on the pod today. I know I appreciate you being in your car and being outside of a fence. I think it's a testament to the things that you want to get done, the drive of your business. You've given some incredible insight of things that just go with the flow a little bit, how things are mapped out. Don't try to rush things. It will all work out the way it's supposed to work out. So we really appreciate your time. Look forward to watching you in the future and appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you so much, Dave. I really appreciate it too. I hope you have an awesome rest of your week.